Hey guys, Connor here. This is my first YouTube video slash podcast. What you're watching is a video from my live stream where I read horror stories from my subscribers. I edited down this video to just the stories for your listening pleasure. I stream every Tuesday and Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time at twitch.tv/Connor Isaac Writer. You can find me reading horror stories at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube at the links in the description. If you're interested in having your stories read, hop into my Discord where I have a channel for submitting your stories. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
We're just going to be reading part one of this story. This is, I started researching a secret monster hunting cult. Here's what I found. So this is part one here, but if you want to read part two, suspicious_fact 5106, check him out. We've read some of his stories before. He did the Halfway Man, which I thought was a really fun classic creepypasta. So I'm excited for this one. I'm glad so many of you were as fascinated by that maintenance report as I was. Oh, so we read the kind of original version of this story in the past. Yeah, I need to figure that out. Okay, anyway. There's nothing else interesting in my grandfather's files, unless you find several thousand billing receipts for small repairs interesting. If you haven't read it yet, you can check it out here. I did turn up some interesting documents, though, after doing some more digging across my own sources. I was looking for things relating to the symbol on that business card my great-uncle was given. So far, I found two documents I believe relate to what I'm calling a secret cult of monster hunters. The first is written in Old English, around 16th century, and it'll take me some time to translate it into modern language. The other is the last confession of a death row inmate. It was written by one James Perlman, a dock worker and gang member who was arrested on the night of September 4th, 1986. He was charged with the murder of 5 fellow gang members and what the police described as a drug deal gone wrong. I'll keep my own thoughts to myself and let you make of it what you will. I swore to myself I'd never tell a soul about what happened on those docks all those years ago. But now, with death staring me in the face once more, I feel I've got to get my story out. I admit, I killed people that night. Or got people killed, whatever you want to call it. People who I called friends. I'm not trying to get off the hook. I'm not crazy either. That Cher and me have had a destiny together ever since that night 20 years ago. All I want to do is get it off my chest. My name is James Perlman, and these are my final words. We were receiving a shipment that night like usual. I was part of a crew that unloaded drugs for the McFerrin family. There was me, Cody, Doc, Finley, Matt, and Mikey. Doc was the one in contact with the McFerrins. We just followed whatever orders he gave us. The drop-off boat arrived on time, cutting through the black expanse below with a low, steady hum. A thin mist clung to the harbor, and the sweet ocean breeze was laced with the sharp scent of diesel. There were 2 men operating it when the boat pulled into the harbor. One of them was a small, mousy fellow with big, thick glasses. His hands were steady on the wheel of the boat. The other was large and stocky. The kind of guy... AI! That's AI! That's AI, guys! That's AI! Just kidding. The other was large and stocky, the kind of guy you wouldn't want to face in a fistfight. He had a look in his eyes, wild and hungry, like a starving beast that hadn't had a decent meal in several days. His skin was pale, so pale you could spot the veins underneath even the foggy Boston sky. Doc spoke with the small one for a couple minutes before the 3 of them started to make their way back to the rest of us. How come he's only got one tiny briefcase? Thought it was supposed to be a big haul tonight, Cody muttered, pacing the floor of the empty warehouse. Keep your pants on, you twat, Finley replied in between sips of beer. It's the expensive shite from across the pond. Of course they don't know when to bring it all at once. I liked the accent in there. Finley looked over and I nodded in agreement. I had mentioned to Doc a few weeks ago about a new drug called Ripper, something that was spreading around in Europe. Doc passed it on to the McFerrins, and they set up a deal. The first drop was more of a test run to see if we could move this new drug. Doc let the odd pair do the open roll-up. Mikey hopped off the empty barrel he'd been sitting on. Cody stopped pacing, and Finley stashed his bottle while Matt stayed seated. I stood up and walked over to meet them. The large man extended the arm with a briefcase with a savage smile on his lips. I could smell a scent so sour my eyelids began to burn as I came close to him. That is some serious fucking BO. What is this guy doing, man? He might have an ear infection in his armpit. I grabbed the briefcase and tried to pull it as quick as I could, but my fingers brushed across his clammy hand. I swear I felt something squirm. I walked back as fast as I could without looking too anxious and rejoined the group. All right, then. We'll be seeing you in a month, Doc stated as the two walked back to the boat. I watched as they peeled out of the harbor, a speck on the moonlit horizon. Hey, pass it here, Cody asked. He probably wanted to try a bit before we got to selling. I walked into Doc's office, threw him in the back past all the crates and containers, and placed it on the table. The others, except for Doc, still closing the warehouse door, crowded around as I popped open the lid. Inside was a single brick. Not even a brick. It was only about as big as my hand, wrapped up tight. It looked just like the other white powder we usually transported, just a little bit coarser. I shut the lid as Doc walked in. All right, we've got 2 hours until distribution, guys. Get here to pick up the Ripper. I know you want to leave, but you all got to stay if you want to get paid. That elicited a round of groans from the group, myself included. Usually we'd spend our time unloading until distribution came, but with such a small supply, there was nothing to do but wait. We had a card game going in the office after moving the older rebar off the table and onto the floor. Cody, Finley, Mikey, and I played while the other two waited around in the warehouse. About our third hand is when Cody got a look in his eye. Hey, he whispered, low enough that Doc couldn't hear. Let's sample a little Ripper, huh? It's gotta be top shelf with that kind of name. Just a little sniff, yeah? Probably shouldn't, man, I replied. Our take is so small. Just wait till they come back with more. Cody kept eyeing the case as he thumbed his cards. Fuck it. I gotta try. None of us stopped him as he popped the case and made a small cut at the top of the package. He stuck his pinky in and brought it to his nose. Oh yeah, he moaned after inhaling the Ripper. That's good shit, Mikey. Try some. Try some. Mikey hesitated, shaking his head faintly, unsure. Finley didn't wait. He slid the case to himself. I'll give it a go. I sighed. I wasn't going to stop them, but I wasn't able to join in either. Sampling the product wasn't just stupid, it was downright unprofessional. I just kept playing cards while Cody and Finley took small bumps from the brick without even blinking. They even got Mikey to try a little. Hey, you're taking too much, I warned, after Cody's fifth dip. Shut it, he growled. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his face twisted with an anger I'd never seen him wear before. All right, I'm getting Doc. As I stood up to leave, Finley crushed the bottle of booze in his hand. There was no warning, just broken glass as the force of his grip shattered it whole. He didn't even move, didn't flinch as the blood dripped from his hand. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to walk out. That Ripper must have been messing with their heads. Doc would straighten them out. I ran into Matt as I walked out of the door. I filled him in quickly and he stormed into the office. I called for Doc, who was standing by the warehouse entrance, then doubled back toward the room. Matt and Cody were locked in a tug-of-war over the case. Why were they acting like this? They both had a hold of the case, but it looked like Matt was having a hard time clutching it. That was odd. He was bigger than Cody, stronger. But Cody had the edge on him, his thin hands gripping so tight his veins were like ropes bulging through his skin. So I'm thinking this drug made Cody stronger. Then Finley stepped forward, clutching a glass shard from his bottle, and drove it into Matt's hand. Matt screamed and let go, the case tumbling to the ground. He stumbled backwards just as Doc burst through the door. The fuck's going on here? He yelled. Mikey bent down to pick up the case, his eyes filled with greed and hunger. Doc was faster. He snagged the case and turned to walk out. What are you... Doc's words died as a length of rebar punched through the back of his skull and out of his open mouth. Cody stood behind him, manic rage in his eyes. He had picked up the rod from the pile on the floor and in one swift motion driven it through the back of Doc's head like a stake. His body fell forward with a dull thud, the bar slipping back out as his body hit the floor. I don't know what possessed me to do this, but in that split second before all hell could break loose, I wrenched the case of Ripper from Doc's lifeless hands. I feel like I couldn't leave it with the other three, not like they were now. They howled in fury as Matt and I turned to run. He was already outside the office, slamming the door shut just as I dove through. They pounded from the other side, every blow denting the metal. That's insane strength, denting the metal with their fists. We pressed our backs to it, bracing. They killed Doc. They fucking killed him, Mike shouted. We can't just stay here. Okay, I can't. Oh. Okay, okay, I huff between breaths. On three, we both run. I think we can make it to the entrance. I started to count. One, the metal buckled against my back, each impact sending a jolt through my spine. Two, one of their hands burst through the door between us, bloody, broken, but still unrelenting. Three, we sprang from the door at the same time as it tore off the hinges. The others exploded through, falling into a pile in front of the office. We got a few precious seconds to escape as they lay in a jumbled mess. That's when we heard banging at the warehouse entrance. Shit, Matt hissed. You think it's the cops? I had blood on my shirt and a case of drugs in my hand. I couldn't afford to run in with the force. Not now. Hide behind those boxes. We'll slip out when they're distracted. Matt and I drove behind the stacked crates to the left of the entrance. We were still a dozen yards away from safety. The door swung open at the same time the others stood up. They were laughing now, each holding some kind of weapon in their hands. Cody had a tight grip around the rebar he'd used to kill Doc. Mikey held a ball peen hammer. Finley had another bottle in his hand, broken and jagged. It wasn't the cops who walked through the door. There were two of them. The first was a young guy, Asian, early 20s maybe. A long blade hung from his left hip, a compact automatic on the right. The second was an old man. He had a thick gray mustache and rounded glasses. His left arm was missing, the other clutching a cane. He walked with purpose, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. You remember how to deal with the Ripper virus, yes? The old man asked the younger in an English accent. An English accent? Is this the Englishman? Take out the brain or sever the limbs. Don't let up on the assault. Good, good. The old Englishman replied. Okay. He stood there, leaning on his cane, while the other one stepped towards the staggering group of my former friends. Mikey leapt first, hammer in hand. He was fast, faster than any human should be. He swung wide at the younger man, wild and reckless. The man sidestepped easily and drew his blade. He sliced upward, severing Mikey's right arm at the shoulder. The hammer and limb went sailing to the side. It didn't stop Mikey. He kept moving, the blood trickling down in slow, deliberate lines, like it was holding itself inside. The quiet, nervous kid had become a monster. I should have used this time to run, to get out, but I was transfixed by the scene in front of me. Mikey swung his left. The man dodged again, smooth and calm. The other two tried to move in now. The man pulled out his weapon and fired in small, controlled bursts. Bullets ripped through them, punching holes in their clothes and bodies. All it did was slow them. Their shirts soaked dark, but no blood poured out. No screams of pain, just laughter. What? What are their shirts soaked dark with? If it's not blood. No screams of pain, just laughter. Mikey kept rushing forward, the man making short work of him. Both his legs were now gone. And even though he couldn't move, he kept wriggling and laughing on the ground. The man aimed at the now immobile Mikey and fired. His laughter stopped. The other two rushed at the same time. The man trained his gun towards them, but Cody was faster this time. He knocked the sidearm away with a length of rebar in his hand. Finley collapsed onto the man's right arm, letting the blade pierce his stomach all the way to the hilt. He took the broken bottle and jammed it into the younger man's eyes. He yelled in pain. The old man rushed forward now, moving with grace that I thought impossible for a man of his age. He tossed his cane and pulled out a heavy revolver from inside his coat. He fired, the blast echoing throughout the warehouse. Finley snapped his head back and the bullet struck his neck. He clutched the wound and stumbled backwards off of the younger man. I finally snapped out of my stupor. What was I doing watching this? I needed to run. Matt had the same realization as we both bolted toward the door. Cody stared us down. James, he yelled in anger as we burst out of the warehouse, his twisted grin never wavering. We ran to our cars near the crane that moves shipments off the cargo ships. I didn't look back, but I knew we were all being chased. We had almost made it off the docks, when Matt fell to the ground with a yell. I turned and saw that pieces of the rebar that had pierced Doc was now embedded in Matt's side. His hands gripped at the bar, trying in vain to hold in the blood now spilling from his gut. Behind him, Cody was already in motion and charging toward us like an animal. I left Matt and ran to my car. I could hear Matt's screams behind me as Cody drove the metal into him over and over, taking some kind of sick pleasure in the pain he was inflicting. I had the key in the door when I stopped. Could I just leave like that? Let this freak run free? I peered back at Cody below, still reveling in the torture. I looked up at the scene, positioned just above the monster underneath. I moved to the ladder. I tossed the case at the beast, the animal Cody had become. He stopped tearing at the mat and smashed it open, burying his face into the powder within. He was too busy to notice the crane spark to life, the rusted metal groaning while I fumbled with the controls. He was too busy to see the hook swing toward him, crushing his body beneath its weight. He was still too busy, his cracked jaw still lapping at the ripper, to move as the hook came down again, and again, and again. I didn't stop slamming the hook into him until the twitching stopped. It just wouldn't stop, not until I had gotten rid of everything that could move, until the thing on the ground was just a spatter of blood, until all was still. I dragged myself back to the ladder, my right arm throbbing. I scooted myself to my car. That's when the sirens came. The police were here, late, but just in time to cuff me and throw me in the back. Everything was pinned on me. Nothing I said seemed to matter. All they saw was 5 dead gang members and 1 living. They never found the other man or the Ripper. Either way, I figured I deserved this. It was my fault we even got the drug that turned half the crew into murderous monsters. My fault for not stopping the others from taking it. It was definitely my hand that ended Cody's life. I know the guards aren't going to believe this, but I hope someone sees my story. Understand that there are strange things out there. And yeah, don't take drugs from strangers. Whew. So that's really funny. Oh man. Oh, Jake. That was a good story, man. I like that. I think this should be definitely read at every dare intervention or meeting. As in like, don't you dare do drugs or whatever. I think they said it. Kyle says that in Nebraska. No, like it's like it works as like kind of a it works as kind of a warning. Obviously an exaggerated one. Don't do drugs. Um, but also I think you write action super well, which I think is kind of your strong suit. I think, like from what I've read from you, I think like one thing that you're really good at is writing action, because when we got into the action portion of this story, it moved really fast. I like that you play with lineation, um, and jumping lines, like doing these short paragraphs where it's just a couple words and these short sentences, which is good when you're in those like intense scenes. You want to try to use those short sentences, and it makes it gives the feeling that things are happening at a fast pace. So I think you did really well with that. Um, and I like the framing as well. The fact that, you know, this is the end of my life. I'm in this situation. I got here because of this, and I just want someone to know my story after even if it's after I'm gone. I just want someone to know the truth. There are strange things out there, and don't take drugs from strangers. Yeah, I enjoyed that. What did everyone think of that? It looks like you guys liked it. Hmm. Yeah, I think it's good to it's good to definitely like keep those things that we feel confident in, but also try to um, move out from there as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's good to action is difficult to write in horror, because a lot of horror is the moment before the action or the moment after the action, and a lot of times what makes things as scary as possible is seeing as little as possible and letting the reader's imagination do the work. But I think in this case, the horror was people you know turning into these murderous beasts and losing the people that you know and your friends. Um, and we do need to see that, right? And we get to see, I mean, imagine how terrible it would be to see the people that you care about start killing each other and then have to kill one of them yourself. So I enjoyed that a lot. And there are two more parts of this series, or it could be more actually. I'll let Jake clarify that. But his Reddit user is suspicious underscore fact 5106. I'll go ahead and drop his link, the link to the story in the chat. So if you want to go check out the rest, feel free to do that. Leave an upvote on this story. Follow him on Reddit. You can see when he puts out other stories in the future. This is great. We'll go ahead and jump into the next one. I saw someone asked about writing accents in writing. My thought on that is, one, there's not really a wrong way to do it. Like some writers, they really like lean into trying to write the words the way that it's spoken. So, like Jake did, where someone has an accent, actually spelling the words differently to get that across. And I think, lots of people love that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Me personally, I don't mind it as long as it's clear enough what the person is actually saying. And I will say that I do prefer the way that I forget what writer. There's lots of writers who do it a lot, but I'm thinking of someone in particular. He'll do the he'll put in quotes what they said, but then after that say, but he pronounced blank like blank. And there's a downside to that, is that like it might make you have to reread the dialogue. But for me, once they kind of say like, he spoke in this accent, he pronounced this like this, I fill in the rest in my head as I go. And that just, for me, I end up reading it more seamlessly that way. But of course, some people would prefer the other way. So it is really just as long as you stay consistent and write it in a way that's easy to read, I don't think there's anything wrong with whatever. I love the Englishman a lot. All right. So I forget, someone put this in the chat saying that I should read this. So I messaged Donovan on Reddit and he said it's cool for me to read it. Just quick reminder, I'm sure you guys already know this, but if you're ever going to do anything like a stream or a YouTube video where you're reading people's work, make sure you have their permission because especially if you're going to profit from it. Of course, I'm not profiting from anything I'm doing. But it's just, I understand the fact that I'm reading these stories, but you guys had to write them. Writing is way more work than reading. So if I were to make any profit from reading someone's story, I would want them to at least be aware of it. And if I'm making enough to, share that profit with them. Right. And I think that should go for anyone who's doing any kind of content where you're reading someone else's story. So just if you're going to be adapting anything, make sure you get permission from the original author. Hello, everyone. My name is Donovan. I've recently discovered a horrific truth about myself that has kept me confined to my bedroom for the last week. A truth that changed the trajectory of my life and irreversibly altered my brain. And to think it was just so accidental. Just one small incident, and I was forced to face the brunt of reality. For years, I went about my life as though nothing was wrong. I didn't feel any different from anyone else. I didn't see myself as anything more than just another teenager, managing his way through the murky waters of high school. I did struggle finding friends, though. That was a big weakness of mine. I'd greet people offhandedly in the hallways, and they'd greet me back, often through cold stares. But I could never manage finding a group that I really fit into. What helped me tremendously during those lonely times was my vibrant home life. I could not have asked for better parents. My mother worked as an accountant, and my father had invested a ton into Apple before it really became the corporate giant that it is today. Mom worked from home for the most part, and Dad had retired the minute he made his first 10 million. Damn. My mother didn't work because she had to. She liked to work. She liked knowing that she served a purpose other than being my dad's trophy wife. She hated being referred to as a trophy wife, as being referred to as that. A trophy wife, she said. Such an outdated term. She never let her disdain show. However, she'd simply smile wider, flashing her beautifully white teeth, before laughing and thanking the person for the compliment, her fist balled tightly at her side. And before you even think it, yes, my father loved my mother. They were soulmates. She was the woman who had his heart, and he had hers. Though our house is bigger, the love remained the same. Writing this now, it feels like my brain is just covering for me. I know what I know, and I just can't force myself to believe what I know isn't real. My parents were very attentive. Not helicopter parents, but caring parents. They were there for me when I needed them most. I can't tell you how many times I'd come home from a long day at school only to find my dad in the kitchen, whipping up some homemade supper, while my mom laid curled up on the couch, knitting the same scarf as always as she waited for me to tell her about my day. Dad brought the food, and Mom brought the comfort, and together we'd sit for hours while I rambled on about what was bothering me. Together we'd dissect the problem, find the solution, and, by the end, feel brand new. So much stress for such a young boy, Mom would sigh. You need to learn to relax, sweetie. Dad would agree, his favorite phrase being, all things past, Donovan, which he'd announce like a mantra before picking a movie for us to watch while Mom made hot tea for each of us. Mom's tea always made me feel better, no matter how hard a day I'd been having. Made with love and a special secret ingredient that only your dad knows about, she'd slyly announce with a wink to my father, who'd flash her a smile from his spot on the sofa. That's sus, dude. I don't like that. Made with love and a special ingredient that only your dad knows about? What are they putting in there? That makes me think like maybe my brain's fucked up, but I'm starting to think like that could be like sexual. I'm just saying. That's weird. That's weird. As high school came to an end and it was time to choose a real career path, I had no job in mind other than firefighting. It's Ripper. Oh man, that would be a funny crossover. That would be a really cool crossover if you guys connected on this and decided to put some Ripper into the story. That'd be fun. Not to jump off topic of the story, but that just reminded me that like Jake, you have some really good like ideas for your stories, man. Like the Ripper and the Halfway Man. Those are such like those are both things that I could see like evolving into like their own little niches in horror. So I like that a lot. Um, I had no other job in mind other than firefighting. I loved the idea of doing work that mattered, helping people when they were in dire need. Little did I know, this decision would become the one that unraveled my mind piece by piece. You see, there are a few things you need to join the force, one of them being your medical records. Simple enough, right? My parents disagreed. They more than disagreed. They discouraged me from even wanting to join. From the moment they found out that joining meant sharing my medical records, they were completely against my plan. I found that comfort came less and less these days. Mom stopped knitting, Dad stopped cooking. We hardly spent any time together at all. One thing that never changed, however, as though a small gesture of hope, was that my mother continued to make my tea. She'd either hand it to me rudely, or I'd awake to find it sitting on my nightstand. Other than that, though, it felt like my parents were slowly turning their backs on me. It's not like I wouldn't ask them to support me. I pretty much begged them for assurance and help with my mental state. It was as though they ignored me every single time. You've grown now, Donovan. You can figure this out yourself. Your father and I want no part in it, my mom would taunt. Coldly. We argued. A lot. A lot more than we'd ever done before. It really tore me apart to feel such intense coldness coming from someone who was as warm as my mother. Dad was no different. He just seemed to stop caring, as if my decision to join the fire department was a betrayal of him. We have more money than you could count in a lifetime, son. Why Why do you want to do something as grueling as firefighting? I could make a call and have you in Harvard like that. He pressed, punctuating his last word. Oh, I didn't like. I read that. I didn't even like. I didn't read it. Like I read it. Like in my like. I predicted it. Punctuating his last word, the snap of his fingers. It's work that matters, Dad. I want to help people. I want to be good. I don't know why you and Mom don't understand that. He looked at me like I just slapped him in the face before marching upstairs without another word. As days dragged on, what had started as small gestures of disapproval soon turned into snarls of malice and disgust. After weeks of insults and cruelties hurled at me by both by my mom and dad, everything culminated in one event where my dad led me to the garage. Locking the door behind him, he got into his Mercedes and started the engine. I love that, just like the casual flex. Not his car, it's his Mercedes. He revved the car 4 or 5 times, and soon the garage became filled with carbon monoxide gas. Okay. The entire time while I pounded on the window, begging him to stop, he just sat there, stone-faced, before cracking his window and teasing, as calm as could be, "Call the fire department. They'll come save you." That's insane. Wow. He then rolled the window back up and revved the engine a few more times. I could feel my vision beginning to swim. And I was like, is he not going to fight back? It's not going to fight back? Or, like, and what the fuck is going on? Also, is the dad not affected by this? I could feel my vision beginning to swim, and I was on the verge of passing out when the garage door flung open. It didn't just like rise. It just sounded like it like, I don't know. And Mom pulled me into not the garage door, like the door, like the door, not the like the door, the doorknob door, not the door. Okay. She left me lying on the floor as she fanned me with some of her accountant papers. I struggled to recover. It's such a funny like thing to realize in that moment. Like, she started fanning me, not just the papers, it's her accountant papers. Once my vision had gone back to normal and I could actually breathe again, Mom leaned in close and whispered, "Now, did the fire department save you?" Or did your mom? This is some insane gaslighting. They planned this out together. He's like, I know how to make him realize that he shouldn't be a firefighter and that he should stay with us instead. I'm going to take him into the garage and start killing him. I want you to open the door and convince him I can save you. The fire department can't save you. I can save you. So don't join the fire department because I saved you. And as quickly as she appeared, she disappeared back upstairs to her office. Dad followed swiftly behind her, stepping over me like I was trash before trotting up the stairs, though so much as glancing at me. This is absolutely diabolical. This is the moment I made my decision to leave home. Fair enough. I didn't care how happy we once were. Happiness seemed foreign now. Safety seemed foreign now. I was going to get into the department whether they liked it or not, and I was going to be gone before they even got the chance to realize it. I stood to my feet and dusted myself off, mentally preparing to go upstairs to pack my things. I'd live out of my car if I had to. As I climbed the stairs to the top, I was greeted by my mother and father. They looked down on me, wordlessly, disappointingly, before shaking their heads and returning to their bedroom in unison. Whatever. I packed a week's worth of clothes, enough to get away for a while and clear my head before coming back for the rest. As I walked out my front door, I glanced over my shoulder for one last look at the house before I completely separated it from my heart. He had a mixture of sadness, regret, and sorrow on his face as he said his goodbyes. "Be seeing you, son," was all he could manage. That's all I got from the man I once looked up to, the man who had just attempted to murder me in the garage. And so I left. I left for the very last time. Well, for the last time in which I'd felt whole, at least. What does that mean? The last time in which I felt whole. So I left for the last time. Well, it's not the last time. I'm going back. I did go back, but I didn't feel whole that time. So this is pretty much the last time. The drive to the medical center was an extremely emotional one. It was as if I could hear my parents' voices. their I love yous, my mom's words of reassurance, and dad's mantra. They all floated around in my head and caused my eyes to fill with tears. By the time I'd reached the medical center, I was a blubbering mess and had to clean myself up in the parking lot before going inside. I provided the front desk lady with my social security number. Interesting. And I waited for her to return with my records. I took some comfort in knowing that I was one step closer to my dream, despite how my parents felt. But the collapse of my family, this is all going to turn out to be a warning tale, a cautionary tale, not to give strangers your social security number. It's going to end with, and I found out my identity was stolen by the nurse. Don't ever give away your social security number. It's going to be an ad for some security service, cybersecurity. The collapse of my family weighed heavily on my chest. With a stoic expression, the lady returned and slid the papers to me along with my social security card. As I sat in my car reading through my paperwork, I could feel the breath of my lungs evaporate while my heart seemed to stop beating. I rushed home, tears staining my cheeks and my mind racing at a million miles a minute. I swung the front door open and screamed for my parents in a broken voice, but the house remained quiet. I raced upstairs, praying to God that they would be in their bedroom. But what I found instead was an empty room. No shot. Void of furniture, not even a bed. Okay, I accidentally read ahead a little bit, but I'm fucking mind blown. You're telling me he just went to the medical center, got some medical records, and the time it took him to drive there and drive back, they took everything away. Okay. It was an empty room, void of any furniture, not even a bed. In the living room, I found my mom's scarf, still sitting in her place on the sofa, still unfinished. In the kitchen, she's been working on that scarf since he was like a teenager. In the kitchen, right by the tea kettle, was what made me fall to my knees and wail in sheer agony. My parents weren't here. They'd never been here. I had been experiencing an excruciating slip, and this little orange bottle of haloperidol proved it. My parents are dead. They died tragically when I was 17, and I had to listen to their screams of pain as they were roasted alive in a house fire at a party they were attending. My dad's retirement party, which had been thrown at a friend's house. I've been waiting outside after my mom assured me that they'd be leaving here in a few minutes. Before the fire broke out, trapping all 20 of the guests inside. So that's why he wants to be a firefighter, I guess. I wanted to help. I wanted to free them from the inferno, but I was too weak. I couldn't even get near the flames. Remorse, dread, and the terrifying realization that I've been living a lie all hit me at once like a freight train from hell. And that's why I'm here, locked away in this bedroom. I can't cope with leaving right now, but I think I'm getting better. I truly believe that I'll be on the rise eventually, but for now, I just want to lie here, alone. As I said, it's been about a week of nothing but darkness and moping. Moping is such a funny word to use in that context. However, as I'm writing this, I believe that I smell that sweet aroma of my mother's tea, freshly brewing in my kitchen. And I think I'm going to go see if she'll pour me a glass. Okay. Guys, I'm a little bit confused. Does someone want to try to explain this story to me? Because I don't get it. That was a sick ending. It was a sick ending, but I don't get it. Okay. So I was getting the idea that his mom was poisoning him his whole life. And that's why at 18 he tries to move out and they don't want him to leave. And because they have some, I don't know, I don't think so, Augustus. I don't understand what happened. That to me, this kind of felt like 3 different stories in one. Because at first, like we have like his mom keeps giving him this tea. She's kind of implying that there's an ingredient in it that she won't tell him about. Then he turns 18 and he wants to leave. And when he's trying to get his medical records, his parents don't want him to get the medical records. So they, and the girls that don't. Well, I'm one of the girls that don't, and so are you. So then he says, "Hey, I want to become a firefighter, but to get in the school, I need my medical records." And then suddenly, as soon as he says that, his parents start hating him, right? And then his dad tries to kill him, and then his mom saves him, and she says, "Did I save you, or did the fire department save you?" So I understand he was hallucinating for like a year. I mean, that doesn't make sense that someone would be hallucinating for a year, and that like and all the things that actually happen. Yes, I was, but I didn't because I don't want to get banned. Um, yeah, so I understand that, Augustus. I think we all, yeah. So I think we understand. I think we're all on the same page on that. But I don't understand why they cared about him becoming a firefighter. Like I do understand, like, he's trying to become a firefighter because he wants to save his parents and he wasn't strong enough to do it. And now something is trying to stop him from becoming a firefighter. But the implication was that it was something about his medical records. They didn't want him to get his medical records. And I guess that like the medical records revealed that he was hallucinating. So I guess his parents were trying to stop him from getting the medical records so that he wouldn't realize that they were a hallucination. That makes sense. But there's still some things that kind of don't really add up. But I think that's the gist of it. So I'll say I enjoyed that story. Um, I don't see where the mother's tea fits into this, unless he's been making it all this time and he's convinced himself that his mom has been making it. But that still doesn't explain how his dad physically brought him into the garage, threw him in the Mercedes, and then but then again, so this does, I was confused when they were in the car why the dad wasn't yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not even saying anything negative about the story. I'm just trying to piece it together in my own head. I mean, I do agree, like it needs like some polishing. Um, but just in the sense of I'm just trying to understand everything in my own head. Now, I did have the question earlier, like what the fuck? Why is the dad able to just be fine with all this carbon monoxide? That was explained by the fact that the dad wasn't real. He was a hallucination the whole time. Um, so I think everything actually does kind of check out, except the T. So this is, I don't think he's here. Um, his name is Donovan. I wish he was here because I'd love to hear from him and get some explanations on some of this, because I think like this was like a very I'll say this, guys, when I'm reading stories out loud, like when I'm verbally reading a story and narrating, it can be hard for me to pay attention to what's happening because I'm focused on talking and I'm glancing at the chat and all these different things. Um, but this one actually kept me pretty hooked because I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I did enjoy this story quite a bit, even if some things were problematic. So I wish he was here to like explain some of those things to me because I did enjoy the story. The way that I found this story was I forget who it was. It might have been Jake or Hypnose or Bose or someone put it in the chat and said like, "Oh, I think this one would be a good one to narrate." And then from there, I just went and DM'd Donovan. I said, "Hey, you cool if I read this on stream?" He said yes. Um, I never linked him the stream or anything though. I probably should have, because how else would he get here? So I probably should have done that. But no, he's not. He's not here. But Donovan 221. Might have to message him later and ask for a little bit of an explanation on this, because this is a good story. Like you could tell, like Augustus said, like you could feel the passion in this story. Like he was doing something fun. I think he had a lot of fun writing this. I had a lot of fun reading it. So with that said, we have a story that I'm pretty excited about. I know nothing about this other than the fact that it's titled The Farm, which is a very vague title. It could go in a billion different directions. Yeah, it was fun, Jake. It was a really fun story. But this is by Broads, so feel free to check him out. Oh, I didn't change the title for that story. I almost didn't change it for this one either. But you've seen Broads a few times. Read a few of his stories already. He did The Third Thing, which I thought was a really great story. So we're going to be reading part 1, part 2, and part 3 because I noticed part 1 was pretty short. So I figured we go ahead and do the whole series. Let's get right into it. After this, after we finish all 3 parts, we're gonna jump to some classic creepypastas. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. Let's do it. The Farm, Part 1. Jacob is warm and groggy, mind and body half asleep. He keeps his eyes shut, unwilling to leave the comfort of his afternoon nap. He lies on his side, one arm jutting straight up beneath his pillow. He can feel his mother behind him, her left arm draped around his torso. The sound of her snoring rattles his ears. Her breath warms the back of his neck. As his mind drifts towards wakefulness, Jacob's senses begin to turn, and he opens his eyes. The bedroom is drenched in soft, pea-colored light filtering in through the master bedroom's curtains. The walls are soft yellow, and the crown molding is soft off-white. The bedsheets are soft. His mother is soft. Jacob is facing the door to the bedroom, above which hangs a crucifix. The door is ajar, allowing Jacob vision into the dimly lit hallway that runs the length of his home. A sliver of light bounces down from the living room, and Jacob's ears twitch to the sound of his father watching a movie. Shouts and gunfire and explosions echo from the TV, and Jacob decides he wants to get up and see what his father is watching. Before he can do that, he knows he must deal with this thing in the doorway. The thing is squat and short, barely taller than Jacob himself, and something about it is ill-defined. His eyes hurt from staring. Jacob tries to blink the fuzzies out of his eyes, but can't quite get them to focus. Where there should be details or definition, Jacob just sees the fuzzies. He thinks it looks a little like a character from one of his coloring books, or one he'd used a half crayon on, coloring so hard he'd smear over the guiding lines until he was left with a sort of messy blob that required much explaining to his mother for her to understand what it was supposed to be. What little Jacob can perceive of the thing confuses him. It is solid black, like its whole body is made of outlines, a detail given to provide clarity for a subject, now the subject itself. Its hair is a mess of tangles and wild curls sticking straight up into the air, reminding Jacob of his cousin's troll doll collection. Light dances around it, adding to the fuzzies and giving the thing a matte sheen. Jacob thinks the light either can't see the thing or doesn't know what to make of it. The only real and concrete detail Jacob can discern is that the thing's eyes are feminine and yellow. Not a soft yellow like the walls of the bedroom, but a hard, sorry guys, I tried to look at the chat and I lost where I was. I'm going to just start. The only real and concrete detail Jacob concerns, the thing's eyes are feminine and yellow. Not a soft yellow like the walls of the bedroom, but a hard neon yellow that emits a strange light of its own, like the headlights on his father's white Ford. And he knows they are feminine eyes, almond-shaped like his babysitter's or his sister's. The thing stands perfectly still in the doorway, a portion of its body concealed behind the door. It peeks around with his arm on the doorframe, its head tilted slightly to the side, watching. Jacob watches back, lying as still as he can. He is not afraid, just curious in that way only a child can be. He watches as the thing's puffed up hair drifts silently in all directions, each strand moving ethereally, as if it were underwater. There is a new sound coming from down the hall. Jacob hears his sister Sarah laughing loudly with their father, followed by half attempts at shushing one another, fingers likely pointing down the hall to the bedroom where Jacob lies. Mother stirs slightly behind him, muttering in her sleep. Jacob keeps his eyes on the thing. Finally, it moves, turning its head to look down the hall, resting there for several seconds before turning back to Jacob. It blinks once, then begins to fade, backing away and dissolving into the shadows of the hallway. Jacob watches it go, still trying to blink away the fuzzies. When his eyes finally clear, the thing is gone. Jacob hears the hardwood floor creak down the hall. The sound is sporadic and drawn out in a way that would let any listener know that someone is trying and failing to be quiet. Jacob watches as the hand slowly wraps itself around the doorframe, followed by the sleeve of a dark shirt, then a mass of wild, red curly hair. Sarah pokes her head into the bedroom. Her eyes find Jacob's, and she smiles, showing off a missing front tooth. Jacob smiles back, stretching his restless limbs on the bed. Their mother yawns and groans, the bed wobbling as she wakes from the bed. About a gunfire draws Sarah's gaze down the hall. She looks at Jacob, blinks once more, and disappears, feet slapping the wooden floor as she races back to their father, leaving Jacob to stare at the shadows in the hall. End of part 1. Oh. Okay, I was really confused about the gunfire because I was like, holy shit, there would be more of a reaction. That's from the TV that the dad is watching from the movie. Okay. I like this. I think let me know if anyone else is feeling the same way, but I'm really getting like Mr. Widemouth from this. I haven't read that since I was like a teenager. So it's been quite some time. So I could be wrong, but just like the entity itself and the kind of vibe it's giving is kind of reminding me of Mr. Widemouth. But obviously we don't know if he's going to act like Mr. Widemouth. I hope not. That'd be traumatizing for this kid. What I don't know what's going on in the chat. I have not. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna pretend or not pretend. I'm just gonna be okay with not seeing anything. And you have birds. That's really cool. I remember having some similar like moments when I was a kid where like to this day I swear I saw a ghost. But with my aphantasia, I can't actually recall what I saw. I don't remember what I saw, but I remember being so confident that it was a ghost, and I've always been confident that it was a ghost. But I was like 6 probably. So I could have just like just convinced myself I saw a ghost. But and I haven't seen anything as I've been older. So I don't know. But it is something I think like horror stories from the lens of a child are so fun because the perception is so innocent that things where an adult would react differently, a kid can sit there and give us this different point of view of maybe they don't react in the way that we would expect. And also if we can assume that, you know, this is third person, but in general, if we were writing from a first person point of view, we're looking back at it as an adult. There's this idea of everything is so far back that we're looking at it with newfound mindfulness, right? Yeah, it always makes me think of Bedtime, which is a story by Matt Demersky. If you haven't read it, it's definitely one of like the best like creepypastas, I guess. But yeah, that was short and sweet. A really fun introduction to the series. The next two parts are a little longer, if I recall correctly. So let's go ahead and jump into the farm part two. The field smells of dry grain and pollen. Jacob runs a dirt crusted finger across the lip of his dripping nose. His dad is in the family combine on the other side of the field, working late to gather what is left of this year's wheat. It's late July, and harvesting season is finally drawing to a close. From the front porch, Jacob hears the familiar and comforting sound of his grandmother sitting in her favorite rocking chair. The wood screams as it rocks back and forth, each cycle microscopically splitting the ancient wood a little closer to a hilarious or tragic end. I like parentheses. I don't know how other people feel about them in creative writing, but I think it adds a little like taste of there's a real person writing this, right? I like that. Birds sing as they fly over Jacob's head, their song rising above the distant hum of the combine. They catch his attention, and he follows them as they fly over the house and perch amongst the trees of his family's small apple orchard. Jacob's family has kept the farm and the orchard for years, each generation passing the land and farmhouse down to the next. Jacob loves the orchard. He loves walking beneath the trees, head upturned, to watch their branches sway in the wind. He loves climbing the trees, especially when the apples are in season and he can sneak some early picks before his father sells them or gives them all away. But most of all, he loves those special times in the orchard, often around the holidays, when all his cousins and family gather at the farmhouse and the adults send them outside to play, and they spend hours and hours playing hide and seek and tags and cops and robbers and capture the flag and whatever other games their minds can imagine. Jacob sports Sarah as he rounds the corner of the farmhouse and approaches the orchard. She is standing beneath one of the trees, eyes upturned into its branches. Jacob begins to feel the subconscious urge of a younger brother who hasn't annoyed his older sister in a while, and starts walking toward her. But after making it to the orchard's edge, he stops, siding himself halfway behind the Virgin Mary statue at the orchard's entrance. The thing is back. Jacob blinks and tries to rub the fuzzies out of his eyes with his fists, but he only manages to see stars. The stars fade, but the fuzzies remain, as does the thing. It is perched up in the branches of the tree above where Sarah stands. It's hanging upside down like a bat, its hair floating in the breeze. Jacob runs his eyes over the canopy of leaves and branches in the orchard. They are all motionless on this rare, windless Oklahoma day. Things start to move, crawling like a spider down the branches of the apple tree and onto its trunk. The leaves it passes wither in an instant and fall lifelessly to the ground, all while Sarah stands unmoving at the base of the tree. The rich, deeply toned bark of the tree grays where the thing's fingers touch it. Jacob feels his small heart beating against his chest. Something is wrong, but he isn't sure what. Why isn't Sarah moving? He tries to move himself, tries to call out, but he is scared by the thing. He doesn't know what it will do if it sees him. The thing is right above her now, hanging from a low branch, the tips of his hair dangling just above Sarah's face. Jacob thinks it sort of looks like Spider-Man when he is about to kiss Mary Jane in the rain. The thing reaches down a spindly black arm, its black fingers caressing Sarah's face. Its feet detach from the branch above, defying gravity as it slowly pivots down and around to Sarah's back, supported by just its delicate fingers on Sarah's forehead. It walks backward, not so much dragging as guiding Sarah along with it. Jacob stands rooted in place like the surrounding trees until he can see only the edge of Sarah's nose. A new fear overcomes the old, and he finds his voice. Sarah! Sarah and the thing slip behind the tree, but less than a second passes before she waltzes back into view. She looks around, obviously confused, before she notices Jacob. She sighs, rolling her eyes as she walks over to where he hides behind the statue. Her face softens as she sees the obvious distress on his face. Jacob, what's wrong? Jacob begins to cry, stumbling out from behind the statue and throwing his arms around his sister. He speaks between sobs. I thought it got you. Jacob feels his sister's hands running through the hair on the back of his head. Thought what got me? she whispers worryingly in his ear. Jacob's crying slows, and he pulls back to look his sister in the eye. The thing, the black thing. Jacob stares into her confusion filled eyes. There's a tension there, something tightly wound up. She looks back at the tree, and Jacob follows her gaze. There is nothing there. Kids! Jacob and Sarah both turn to see their mother standing at the back door, her stained apron covered in flour. Supper's about ready. She pauses, then proceeds down the steps of the house's back porch. Is everything all right? I don't know why. I just did like a British accent or something on accident. But I'm really into this story right now. I really want to figure out what's going on with the thing. It's paced very, very strongly. Jacob lets go of his sister and rubs his arm across his eyes. Yeah, Mom, Jacob thought he saw something in the orchard and got scared. I looked, but there's nothing there. Sarah waves an arm back towards a tree as she speaks. Their mom nods her head. You okay, sweetie? She asks. Jacob nods his head. She stands there another moment, hands on his hips, brow furrowed in slight worry. Well, why don't you come inside, have a sunny D, and help set the table? She holds out her hand, and Jacob takes it, letting her lead him and Sarah inside. As they approach the house, Jacob looks up at the kitchen window. He sees Grandpa standing there, but he isn't looking at Jacob, Sarah, or Mother. Jacob turns his head, following his grandpa's gaze. He is looking out at the orchard, at the tree with the withered branch. Interesting. I love the pacing. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive from thy bounty, thou Christ our Lord. We give thee thanks for all thy benefits, O Almighty God, who lives and whose rule is without end. Amen. May the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Jacob opens his eyes and lifts his head along with the rest of his family. Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, Sarah, and himself all sit around their large dining room table. Jacob's stomach growls, and he licks his tangy, Sunny D-coated lips at the side of the meal his mom has prepared. Fried chicken in a homemade batter, mashed potatoes with brown gravy, corn on the cob dripping with butter and sparkling with salt, and a loaf of homemade sourdough bread, steam still rising off its surface. Jacob dives in, grabbing a massive chicken leg in both hands and taking a bite so big that by the time he is done chewing, his jaw is already sore. Jacob, please slow it down. The food isn't going anywhere, says his mom. Oh, it's going somewhere, says his dad with a smile. Straight into his stomach. He's a growing boy, ain't he? They all chuckle, all save Grandpa. Jacob keeps his attention on his plate, but he can feel Grandpa's eyes on him. His mind races with questions. Why was Grandpa looking at the tree? Did he see the thing? Why hasn't he said anything? Jacob's dad continues. Should be a good season for apples this year, don't you think, Pa? Grandpa chews his food slowly, gravy slipping down the corners of his wrinkled lips. There's a rot. The table falls silent. Jacob looks over at Grandpa, along with the rest of his family. He kicks his feet back and forth beneath the table, waiting anxiously for someone to speak. What do you mean? Asked Dad, head tilted to the side in confusion. I mean what I said. Grandpa replies, spitting bits of mashed potatoes across the table. A sudden vigor seems to fill him, an energy Jacob has never seen his grandpa possess. An anger. There's a rot in the orchard, a tree with a withered limb and barely a leaf on her. Dad puts his elbows up on the table, hands clasped in front of him in a diplomatic fashion. Pa, are you sure of what you saw? Your eyes have been going out for some time. I saw it too, says Jacob shortly. He doesn't like it when Dad and Grandpa fight. It scares him. What did you see, Jacob? His dad asked with a huff of exasperation. Jacob thinks for a moment, trying to find the words. I saw a branch go gray, and then the leaves started falling off it, really fast. He pauses, but decides to tell the truth. The thing did it. The black thing that was after Sarah. The table shakes as his grandpa slams a fist down by his plate. Jacob feels the urge to shrink back into his chair, make himself smaller so as not to be seen. Damn those fickle creatures, and damn you. Grandpa points a finger at Dad, but Jacob catches his eyes wandering, if only for a moment, to Mom. Damn you for pissing him off. Jacob looks around the table, unsure of what Grandpa means. Mom is watching Grandpa with hate in her eyes. Sarah is watching Mom, just as confused as Jacob. Grandma has her head down and her eyes on her plate as if she's found something interesting in her potatoes. Dad coughs. Pa, if you're referring to the shrine, what the hell else would I be referring to? Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, son. You went messing with things you shouldn't have. Things that have kept this farm thriving for generations. Mom's chair squeaks against the floor as she pushes herself back and stands up. I won't listen to this. I won't listen as you try to defend your pagan folk nonsense. Mom storms off down the hall towards her bedroom. Jacob flinches as the door slams, practically shaking the whole house. The table falls silent. Grandpa pushes his own chair back, the act much slower and less intimidating than Mom's. Grandma tries to help him up, but he waves her off. It ain't pagan, he mumbles between heavy breaths, and it ain't nonsense. He starts off towards his and Grandma's room, Grandma at his side, before turning back around. And come morning, I won't be surprised if the whole orchard is filled with rot. What remains of the harvest filled with rot? This whole damned house filled with rot. Jacob sits in silence, listening to his grandparents as they shuffle down the hall towards their bedroom. Grandpa huffs and mumbles under his breath, but Jacob can't make out the words. He hears the squeak of their door closing, followed by the quiet latching of its lock. Jacob kicks his legs beneath him, eyes darting between his father and his sister. Sarah has her head down, looking at her food, sneaking quick glances up at their father. Dad is glaring at Jacob with a look that fills him with fear. But then, the look softens, and Dad sighs. Sarah, honey, why don't you go find a nice movie for us to watch? Sarah quickly bolts from the table and runs to the living room. Jacob can hear her as she sifts through the large wicker basket full of DVDs. Dad turns his attention back to Jacob. Jacob, he asks, can you tell me everything that happened in the orchard today? Everything you saw? Jacob nods his head and quickly begins going over every detail his young mind can remember about the afternoon. Sarah beneath a tree, the thing stalking towards her from one of the branches. Every plant the thing passed withering and turning gray. The thing pulling Sarah behind the tree, then Jacob yelling for her right as she disappeared. When he's done, it looks like all the color has drained from his dad's face. He leans back in his chair, sighing loudly. A moment of silence passes before he bends back down toward Jacob. All right, he says. Thank you for telling me. I'll talk to Mom, and we will get all this squared away in the morning, I promise. He starts to get up, but Jacob can't help but ask a question burning deep inside him. Dad? His voice is little more than a whisper, and a small part of him is afraid of what might be listening. Yes, son? Jacob takes a shaky breath. Will the thing try to take Sarah again? His father looks him in the eyes, then lays a comforting hand on his shoulder. Jacob, I promise you, nothing is after Sarah. She's safe, and everything will be okay. Jacob nods his little head, taking his dad's hand and following him into the living room. He makes it about halfway through the Pirates of the Caribbean before he starts to nod off and his father carries him to bed. He drifts off to sleep almost immediately, and dreams exciting dreams of pirates and skeletons and adventures and gold. The next morning at breakfast, Jacob witnesses Sarah faint face first into her bowl of oatmeal. End of part 2. This is really great. This is honestly one of the best stories I've read in a while. And we still have one more part left. I'm not sure how we're going to, and I'm not saying this in a doubtful way, I'm just genuinely curious how we're going to wrap up all of this in just one more part. Because I feel like there's some questions that need to be answered. We need to really get to see the thing and deal with it and whatever. Like, do we need to kill it? Or how do we get rid of it? All those questions, all these things need to be answered. And we need to, a lot needs to be wrapped up in this third part, but I think the pacing is really great. And I love this idea of we don't have all the answers, but we know that someone in this story does. And it has to do with some sort of ritual, or some sort of, well, like the mom said, pagan nonsense. And there's something going on here that is real and everyone knows it's real. I like that this isn't a story where it didn't take the common route where the kid can see it and no one believes him. That's so played out. This is a very original take on that. that I think serves the story super well. I also like the fact that the writer Broads is kind of weaving together a very adult themes and adult observations, but also reminding us that we are, although this is third person, our closest character is a kid, right? He's dreaming dreams of pirates and skeletons and adventure and gold. And it reminds us of who we're with, right? And then we end this part on a very interesting kind of cliffhanger, or at least a cymbal clang, where we want to know what happened next. Why did Sarah faint into the bowl of oatmeal? We know it has to do with the thing. We know it has to do with the rot. But what's going on? And that is what we're going to find out in part 3, which I'm really excited to read. All right. Farm part 3. Dr. Erie steps out of Sarah's bedroom, easing the old wooden door shut with a click. He spots Jacob watching him and musters up a soft, reassuring smile before stepping out into the backyard to talk with Mom and Dad. Dr. Erie is a friend from church whose family owns another farm just down the road. Jacob likes the doctor, but a smile does little to calm Jacob's nerves. Jacob watches his parents through the window as they talk with Dr. Erie. His dad looks calm, nodding his head and even smiling as he tries to crack a joke. Dr. Erie grins politely, even going as far as to chuckle a bit with Dad. Mom just stands there, red-eyed and tired. Jacob glances down the hall towards his sister's bedroom. He quietly slips out of his seat, leaving his plate of cold, half-eaten pancakes behind, and tiptoes down the hall. The door creaks as he cracks it open. Inside, his sister's bedroom looks as it always has. Flowery wallpaper, white mirrored desk, several Britney Spears posters. Is that how you spell Britney Spears? I thought she spelled her name different. Never mind. Britney Spears posters, nothing out of place. But Jacob can see Sarah in her bed, eyes closed, chest barely rising and falling. Her skin is pale and thin as paper, covered in droplets of gleaming sweat. Jacob cracks the door open further, peeking his head deeper inside to get a better look around. Now, honestly, Bros, I think you're right. I think I'm just faded. Why don't you just leave her alone? He asks, the thing balled up the corner of the ceiling. He can't help but think once more as Spider-Man crawled against the side of a New York high-rise. The thing is perched, right leg / right arm on one wall, left leg / left arm on another. It blinks its yellow eyes at him and cocks its head to the side. What is going on in my chat? We have a straight man serving cunt? I mean, I'll take some, but what? Why are you doing this? What do you want? Jacob pleads as he rubs his eyes, his head dizzy from looking at the thing. The thing stares at him for a moment before slowly raising a shadowy hand to point directly at Sarah. Suddenly, Jacob is thrust back, the door slamming shut with a bang as a force spins him around. Jacob looks up to find Grandpa towering over him, hands on both of his shoulders. Who are you talking to? He asks, his voice serious, piercing his eyes, bearing into Jacob's face. Jacob looks to the ground to avoid his grandpa's stare, a shameful nausea building in his stomach. When he doesn't speak, Grandpa asks another question. Is one of them in Sarah's room? Jacob snaps his head up at the question, mouth open in shock. Slowly, he nods his head. Where? Grandpa asks softly. In the corner of the ceiling, Jacob whispers. Grandpa loosens his grip on Jacob's shoulder, cracking open the door to take a look himself. Jacob watches as Grandpa runs his eyes over the room and grunts disappointingly. All right, he says with a sigh. Come with me, son. Jacob follows Grandpa back to his and Grandma's bedroom, a million questions floating through his head, one burning in the front of his mind. Grandpa knows about the thing. Grandpa opens his bedroom door and ushers Jacob inside. The room is dark and smells old. Crucifixes cover the far wall, but above the bed's headboard hangs a large painting of a countryside, emerald glades as far as the eye can see. Grandpa plops down on the bed and then bends low, grunting with effort. The floor screeches as Grandpa tugs once, twice, 3 times, each tug revealing more and more of a large wooden chest beneath the bed. Your mother, God bless her heart, she made me promise to throw it all away. Jacob leans over the edge of the bed, watching as Grandpa undoes the chest latches. But what your mom doesn't know won't hurt her, right, boy? Jacob can feel Grandpa waiting for a response, his implicative tone ringing in Jacob's ears. A lump of guilt forms in his stomach, but Jacob swallows it down and nods his head. Good, Grandpa says. He begins to open the chest, rusty hinges squealing with disuse. Jacob watches from the side of the bed, waiting in anxious wonder at what could possibly be inside. In his mind, he imagines Grandpa unveiling stacks of gold and magic wands as some kind of weapon he can use to fight the thing. Instead, Grandpa reaches into a sack within the chest and removes a single rock. He lifts it slowly from the bag, almost reverentially. Dark lines and grooves crisscross its smooth, gray surface, and as Jacob leans in closer, he can tell the markings are not natural. Ogham stones, whispers Grandpa, holding the stone up for Jacob to see. He lifts the whole bag out of the chest, and Jacob hears the clattering of several stones. These here, son, these are relics. Relics of a bygone age, straight from Ireland herself. For decades, they sat as an altar beneath the orchard, a small remnant of our heritage. When I was your age, once a week, with the setting of the sun, my father would go out at sunset with gifts, offerings for the fair folk. A little wheat, a little honey, a bit of bread, and, when it was the season, a handful of ripe apples. He did it as his father had done, and his father before him. I did it in my youth, and I taught your father to do the same. Jacob reaches into the bag and carefully removes one of the stones. It nearly touches the edges of his palm. On the stone is a long straight line cut down the middle, with 5 shorter lines near the middle cut to the left. A good choice, Grandpa says. He runs a wrinkled finger shakily down the center line of the stone. Quart or apple in our tongue. It was your father's favorite. He stops for a moment, finger hovering over the stone. Why? Asks Jacob. Why are these in here and not out in the orchard? Grandpa sighs deeply. Your mother, Jacob. I left her to pieces, like she was one of my own. But she doesn't have our heritage. She doesn't understand the old ways, and she's refused to learn. Says it's not Christ-like. Thinks me a pagan. There ain't a God besides God, as she would say. And I wholeheartedly agree. But to think this, he smacks one hand on the wooden bed frame while motioning around the room with the other, is all there is aside from God above, well, I must wholeheartedly disagree. The good books talks of power and principles, things set over the land, and I know who was set over ours. He pauses for a moment, and Jacob can almost see the rusty, aged gears spinning in his head. The fair folk ain't evil, he continues. It's the first time in the farm's history they've spilled over into a foul mood, and it's our fault for not giving them what they are owed. Jacob watches his grandpa rise from the bed with obvious effort, his age on full display as he bends down to return with stones to the sack, tying it off with a loose knot. He then lifts the sack, holding it out in front of him, in front of Jacob. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and to God that which is God's. Jacob meets Grandpa's expectant gaze, a swarm of locusts buzzing in his belly. I'm too old, Jacob, Grandpa whispers. I can't see them, but you can. It has to be you, son. Slowly, Jacob slides off the side of the bed, bare feet hitting the old, stained carpet. With a deep breath, he holds out his arms to take the sack. Grandpa drops the heavy bag of stones into his arms. Jacob nearly drops the bag, stumbling a little before finding his legs. Grandpa kneels in front of him, knees cracking with the effort. You're a good boy, Jacob. Everything will be all right if you do as I say. Go tonight, at sunset, when the firmament is thin, and you can pass over. But return as quickly as possible. Do not stay long. Offer the sacrifice. Beg, promise. Do whatever you must to get them to return Sarah to us. He places a veiny hand on Jacob's shoulder. Do you understand, son? Jacob nods his head. A part of him is afraid, But if there is a chance of getting Sarah back, he knows he has to try. Grandpa pats him on the back. Good lad. Now let me show you how to arrange the stones, and then I'll go gather the offerings. The late summer sun is low in the sky as Jacob slips silently at the back door. The world glows like the embers of a dying fire, specks of pollen riding along the last rays of the sun's dying light. Jacob tiptoes as he walks beneath the trees, repeatedly glancing over his shoulder toward the back door and window to the kitchen, certain Mom or Dad will catch him any second. Grandpa had promised they would be too busy caring for Sarah, but Jacob feels nervous nonetheless. The bundle of grain, honey apples, and carved stones weigh heavily on him, the rope sling digging into his shoulder as sweat forms on his forehead, assisted by the soon-to-be warm summer night. Despite the warmth, a chill permeates his flesh, festering deep in his soul and sending goose flesh bubbling down his arms. Jacob grunts as he sets the heavy sack of offerings on the ground beneath the sickly tree, lifeless gray leaves crunching beneath its weight. He stares up at the withered limb. He's never seen something so devoid of life. When the sun finally begins to dip below the horizon, he quickly begins stacking the carved stones at the base of the tree exactly how Grandpa had shown him to. It doesn't take long, and after a few minutes he steps back to examine his work. The stones sit arranged into 3 spiraling lines flowing out from Kurt, the central stone. Jacob bounces on his heels and taps the sides of his legs. He waits for something to happen, all while the sun sinks lower and lower beneath the horizon. His eyes jump from tree to the sack to the sun, then back to the tree over and over again. He watches the sky melt ever deeper into blues and greens, a warm breeze picking up and ruffling his hair, cooling his sweaty skin. He looks once more to the sun, now only a sliver of light poking up above the plains. When he looks back at the tree, he no longer knows where he is. The sky has turned cold and gray, much like the withered branch on the apple tree. There isn't a single cloud in sight, just an endless gray expanse dotted with what might be stars, if stars were inverted pinpricks of black. Jacob spins, looking for the sun, but it is nowhere to be seen. He stands before a tree that looks nearly identical to the ones back in the orchard. However, this one looks as though the rot, as Grandpa put it, has consumed the whole of the tree. It's leafless and sickly and gray. Thick veins of pulsing black riddle its surface and run down every crack in the bark. Hello. Jacob calls out as he picks up the offering bag. A slurping sound pulls Jacob from his thoughts. He turns and sees the surface of the tree boiling with black. Bubbles of tar like rot swell on the surface of the tree, growing bigger and bigger until they look the size of ripe October pumpkins. One of the boils suddenly pops, and Jacob takes several steps back to avoid the spray of rot that scatters on the ground. Jacob watches in a trance as the liquid begins to move, bubbling with a sound like firecrackers popping beneath the waters of a pond. Slowly, the inky mass starts to converge, and from it, Jacob can discern familiar features. First, it forms into toes, then legs, a torso, arms, a hand, a neck, a head, and finally, a bundle of wavy black hair. From deep within the mass, 2 yellow orbs poke through the thing's face, rearranging themselves into a set of feminine, almond-shaped eyes. Jacob barely has time to understand what's happening before it happens again at the next tree over, the one beside that, and then everywhere. In an instant, every tree in the grove is bubbling, boils forming and popping and spilling rot onto the gray ground before rising into more of the things, more of the Fae. As the final Fae takes shape, the grove falls into silence. Each Fae stands before its own tree, their yellow eyes on Jacob. They all appear young, with dainty, childlike frames. Some appear to be boys with shorter hair and stout eyes, while some, like the first, are girlish, with long hair flowing in a non-existent breeze. All are black as tar and give Jacob's eyes the fuzzies if he looks straight at them. He turns to the one nearest him, the one he knows is responsible for poisoning his sister. Hello, I've come to say my family's sorry. Please forgive us. Jacob sets the bag of offerings down on the gray ground in front of him, halfway between himself and the Fae. Please, he continues, please stop hurting my sister. We're really sorry. The Fae remains silent and still. Hesitantly, Jacob bends down and starts unwrapping the bag full of offerings. He lays out the wheat, the apples, the bread, and the honey before the Fae. He motions toward them with his arms. Please, these are for you, and there will be more. My grandpa told me to promise you that there will be more. The Fae stares at him, its inhuman eyes betraying no emotion. Finally, it moves. It places one of its hands on the surface of its tree. Panic swells in Jacob's chest as he watches the Fae's rot-riddled body begin to fuse once more with the tree. The gurgling sound returns, and Jacob realizes each and every Fae is returning to its tree. No, Jacob cries, reaching out for the nearest Fae. The fuzzies intensify as he does so, forcing him to the ground in a fit of nausea and piercing pain in his eyes and stomach. He looks up, vision blurry from tears. Please, please forgive us. We'll do anything. I'll do anything, give anything. Just leave my sister alone. The gurgling sound slows and then stops altogether. Jacob blinks, trying to clear the tears from his eyes. The Fae watches him, hand hovering slightly above the surface of its tree. Then, with a sound like a snapping sinew, like muscle being rent from bone, the thing opens its mouth. Tainted yellow light pours forth from a place Jacob instantly wishes he never knew existed. Promise? Jacob tries to breathe through the terror of hearing its voice, a voice he'd recognize anywhere. It sounded just like his sister's. Jacob closes his eyes and whispers, I promise. When he opens his eyes, the Fae is no longer by its tree. It's crossed the space between them and is holding out a dainty black hand. Jacob stands, his body shaking, and reaches out to shake the Fae's hand. The second their fingers touch, Jacob is overcome with a pain so pure and so terrible that he knows, far beyond any glimpse of understanding should ever have cemented in his young mind, what hell is. The pain spasms up his arm, filling every atom in his body with fire. He screams, pulling away with all his meager strength, but the Fae does not budge. Instead, it pulls him in closer, every inch intensifying the pain. The light from its mouth sears his eyes, blinding him until his vision is nothing but an eternal spear of sickly yellow light. Freezing air gushes from the Fae's mouth as it presses itself against his ear and whispers, Don't forget. Fae lets go, and Jacob's world goes black. Jacob wakes to the sound of a rooster crowing. He lies flat on his back and feels like every muscle in his body has been individually beaten to a pulp. The bright morning sun shines in his eyes. He raises his right hand to block the rays, then stops. He fears his mother shouting his name as she runs across the orchard, but her voice barely registers. Jacob is too focused on his hand and the sickly black spot, barely larger than a dime, that now stains his palm. Jacob watches as the farmhouse shrinks in the rearview mirror. He drives by the sold sign as he reaches the end of the farm's lawn driveway, stopping before turning onto the old dirt road that leads to town. He tried to make it work, tried to keep the farm alive, but hell, he just couldn't compete with corporate anymore. They've been buying land around here since before he was born, Dad used to joke. It would only be a matter of time. It's just the way of things. But still, seeing as it was his name on the papers, he couldn't help but feel it was his fault for losing the place. He turns the corner, refusing to acknowledge the sorrow of knowing it's the last time he ever will. He thinks of Natalie and her little girl Tara, both waiting for him at home. Jacob focuses on the thought that by this time tomorrow, they'll be landing in Florida, where Sarah's husband has offered Jacob a job. Jacob rolls the window down to listen to the land one last time, but immediately regrets it. Even this far away, he can hear the sound of revving chainsaws ripping through his orchard with their iron teeth. A spark of panic ignites deep within him at the sound, though he's unsure why. Memories of leaving offerings for the fair folk, as Grandpa used to call them, beneath the orchard bubbles to the forefront of his mind and stay there. It was a tradition they'd started shortly after Sarah's unusual sickness and his own episode in the field. He can still hear Grandpa's last words to him before he passed. Remember who's set over our land. Jacob tries to focus on the road and keep driving, but a sudden pain in his eyes makes it difficult to see. He blinks over and over, but it's like a film has grown over his vision. He slams on the brakes, his truck coming to a standstill in the middle of the road. His whole body is shaking. He tries to breathe steadily but can only manage frantic gasps. The dark scar in his palm, the one he'd had ever since going missing that night all those years ago, throbs with pain. Jacob glances at the scar. It's growing larger, the veins of his hand swelling as a blackness spreads over his palm. Dear God, he whispers as the memories of a long-forgotten childhood nightmare reassert themselves as reality. Don't forget. Jacob throws his foot on the gas pedal, speeding home as fast as he can. We leave tonight. No, we leave as soon as I get home. We just have to get out of town, out of state. He makes it about halfway to town when his phone starts ringing. He fumbles to retrieve it from the passenger seat. Natalie, he says softly, a distant part of his soul knowing what comes next. It's Tara, she says in a shaky voice. I think she's sick. Oh my God. Dude, that was sick. No pun intended. But I'm never someone that says this. Never. Like, I hate when people say, like, there needs to be another part of a story that doesn't need another part. I'm not saying this needs another part, but I would love to have one more part of this because I want to figure out what's going on with Tara. I mean, we know what's going on with Tara. And we know it has to do with the thing and the rods and the Fae, but I want to see how they handle this. Or maybe there is no way to handle it. That was really good. I really did enjoy that. I like I said earlier, I love stories and like this child point of view and having to do something, an act to save someone. In a way that's not just, you know, going out guns blazing and actually like using your love to help someone. I don't think it needs another part, honestly. I really like the story and I do like Jacob. Um and even though he's just introduced Tara, the fact that he like this character that we've gone through these 3 parts with now has a kid, I care about her already and I want to see her saved. So I'm sure Broads will answer, but I think because we saw Oklahoma mentioned in the story, and this takes place in Oklahoma. I believe he's coming out with a collection on his Substack, which is going to include all stories that are based in Oklahoma. But he can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Yeah, I caught the Oklahoma mention, and of course this is set in a farm, so it's very Oklahoma-y. But no, that was super enjoyable. I really liked that. Yeah, so I started a Substack, but I haven't kept up with it because for new paid subs on Substack, that's really cool, bros. That's a good way to do that. I don't know if you because I feel like Substack, and you know more about it than I do. I feel like it can be difficult to form a like fan base from Substack, but maybe it's easier to form a fan base somewhere else and then have them follow you on Substack. And I see you've posted quite a bit of stories on Reddit, but unfortunately, like Tales from the Creep and Scary Stories and all these subreddits, they're not that great at reaching a wide audience. So I feel like if you were to write a like first person no sleep story that's kind of like clickbaity, you could get a little more of an audience head in that way and maybe get some paid subscribers on there. The Bitterverse, I forgot there's a Bitterverse subreddit. I I know about the website, but I don't know if I viewed the subreddit. I'll need to go follow that. But yeah, if you guys like, I highly recommend, I'll go ahead and grab the link. Go follow Broads on Substack. He put out a post a couple days ago that I really enjoyed. Um, and it's just kind of like, getting to know him, explaining like what his writing's about, why he writes, and he showed also a cool video of him drumming. So that made me, I enjoyed that. It's very impressive. Um, oh, that's cool, Augustus. Yeah, so I want to get some like followers on Substack. The problem is I don't really have anything to post yet, and I'm trying to do so many different things, like full-time school with working, and then my personal writing, my writing for school. I'm trying to get into streaming more. I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel, which, like I said earlier, I'm kind of working on a little script for a video right now, which is going to be my creepypasta slash no sleep story tier list. um I have a story that I want to post soon. It's about 10,000 words that I'm I'm done with it, but I need to edit it, and I'm thinking about releasing it on Substack, but I don't think it's going to get a lot of reads. But hopefully if it does, the other option is putting it on No Sleep, where it could get deleted, but I'm thinking about putting it on No Sleep and hoping it does really well and I can kind of bring some of those people over to Substack. So Substack, from my understanding, you can use it in a few different ways. So I use Substack as a mailing list for one, which I have 40 free subscribers on Substack, where I brought them over from my old mailing list, which was kid is ass Luna, which was on a different site, Mailer Lite. So you can use it as a mailer list, as a mailing list, but also as a place to just post things. And you can have, you can. It's almost like a Patreon built in, where you can have paid subscribers, and you can have posts that only go to your paid subscribers, or posts that are free for anyone who follows you. So you can do like a combination of like free posts and paid posts, um, based on your, based on what you need. Yeah. And Broads probably knows more about it than I do because he's more active on there. But that's my kind of understanding. It's similar to Medium, but it's kind of combining like Patreon, um, with like kind of like a blog type site. So it's a good place for writers if you have an audience and if you have people who are willing to support you and pay for your work. The way I would look at it is, yeah, I know, Augustus. The way I would look at it is like, I don't think anyone's gonna get, at least for just writing fiction, unless you are like Stephen King. I don't think anyone's gonna get people who are, um, paying strictly just to read their stories. I think it's going to be people who want to read your stories, but just respect you as an author enough and admire you to want to give you a little money and just support you how they can. I think that's how I plan to use it. As I probably am not going to do a lot of paid things, but maybe just one every now and then I'm not really going to push for people to get paid subscriptions. But if they just feel like I want to support this guy, um, they can pay and get like a little bit of extra content every now and then. Yeah, it is also good for connecting with other writers. I see a lot of people, actually, I don't know if you guys know, I forget her name, but she wrote the novel My Dark Vanessa. She has a Substack, which she basically uses just as a blog. And she writes about like how she's feeling about her writing. It's actually really interesting to see how like other writers think about their writing on a daily basis. So it is a really cool place, because you get to see like all different kinds of writers just kind of talk about their process. Yeah, I definitely would say like Substack's not something that you need, because I mean, as you can see, I've had one for some time and I don't really use it. But I think if you're someone who's able to pump out a good amount of content, it probably is very, very nice to have. Um, I think it is difficult to keep up with multiple things because if you're one trying to build an audience on Substack, but two also trying to create content for your Substack audience, it kind of requires you to make different kind of content on different places, right? So you might have to post once a week on Reddit and once a week on Substack, and doing both and different things on both, like one short story for Reddit, one exclusive for Substack, um, or whatever time frame you want to do. It requires, I feel like it would require a lot of work, but it probably is worth it if you can really pull it off. Another option would just be like posting stories on Reddit, but then maybe posting your thoughts behind the story and kind of a writing blog on Substack. Um, there's lots of different ways to do it. Hey, Brett, you're good, man. I appreciate you coming out, and it definitely was not a read and run because you were here the whole time, not just for your story. Even if you did just come for your story, or if you didn't come at all, then I mean it's all good, dude. I do appreciate you just stopping by. Always nice to see you in the chat, and thank you for letting us read your awesome story. That one was really great. Red, obviously, that's the third full story I've read for you now. I think that was my favorite out of all of them. And Wendigoon would have loved that one for sure. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and get into some classic creepypastas. The reason that we're reading these is solely because I'm making a tier list where I'm ranking them. And I have read Mr. Widemouth and the Russian Sleep Experiment. However, I do need to refresh myself on them a little bit. So I'd like to just maybe read the Russian Sleep Experiment, and we can talk about it a little as a chat and see, what we think worked and didn't work, and where we kind of rank it as in the grand scheme of great community story, great horror stories. She started having a seizure. Oh my god. But it inspired Project Nightcrawler, so it's worth it. I really like Project Nightcrawler. It's like another one that I'm planning to go back and read the rest of it sometime. It's just so hard with all these different things I'm trying to read. It's awesome to like be in this community and meet all these great writers like you guys, but it's also kind of daunting because it makes you realize like, wow, like on one side, like, yay, there's so many good writers, but on the other side, it's like, fuck, there's so many good writers. How am I going to stand out amongst all these great writers? And secondly, it's so much stuff to read. I want to read all of your stuff. I want to read all of Bode's stuff. I want to read all of Augustus's stuff. Like I want to read all of Jake's stuff. It's like, how could I ever have time to read all of this stuff? Especially when I'm trying to read other books and I read 3 books a week for school and I'm trying to do my own writing and stream and make YouTube videos and all these things. It's awesome to be so busy all with stuff that I love. So like I'm so happy, but it is kind of daunting at the same time. But anyway, let's get into the Russian Sleep Experiment. I'm going to go ahead and read the overview as well. So not all of this is the actual story, but some of it is just kind of some general knowledge about the Russian Sleep Experiment, which will hopefully elevate our reading experience a little bit and give us some context that I can work into my video script later. So here's the overview. Widely regarded as one of the most popular and widest spread creepypastas ever written, the Russian Sleep Experiment is notorious as much for the gruesome nature of its content as for its plausibility. To this day, a large portion of the articles written about the story are attempts to investigate its validity or to debunk it as a hoax. something that speaks not only to the story's effectiveness, but also to the deeper societal anxieties to which the story appeals. For those who don't know, the Russian sleep experiment is a supposedly factual account of experimentation acted out on subjects by the Soviet government and military in the wake of World War II. The experiment, ostensibly meant to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on the human body, was also used to test a new gas that could keep the people awake for days at a time. The report documents the degeneration. I just realized I need to turn off the text here. Oh, she got mad that you wouldn't. I feel like I'm missing some tea right now. We might need this. Might be its own story. Let's not meet story. Let's not meet again story. Something that speaks not only to the story's effectiveness, but also to the deeper societal anxieties to which story appeals. For those who don't know, the Russian sleep experiment is supposedly, I know I already read some of this, but it's whatever, a factual account of experimentation acted out on subjects by the Soviet government and military in the wake of World War II. The experiment, ostensibly meant to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on the human body, was also used to test a new gas that could keep people awake for days at a time. The report documents the degeneration of those experimented upon, individuals commonly referred to within the Creepypasta community as the test subjects. The horrifying result of these experiments and the crazed, almost subhuman or demonic creatures it produces are often illustrated alongside the story, with one image in particular being representative of the entire myth. Russian sleep experiment creepypasta story. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This is before closed circuit cameras. They had only microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilets, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past. And the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones at one-way mirror portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was the effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do. They would not do to get a reaction from the captive. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military force funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response during the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and the soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them in life. Okay, I'm gonna stop reading for just a second, just to address the chat. Hey Arkadin, I'm really happy to see you in here, man. I love when you're here. You bring a good vibe to the chat. I usually stream every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. I will be streaming every single Friday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Unless something happens, unless I literally can't stream that day, I'll make an announcement in my Discord, which you can join by putting !Discord in the chat. Other than that, I am trying to stream 2 or 3 days a week, but the other days are kind of rotating, and I don't have a set schedule yet. My school semester is starting next Tuesday, so once I kind of get settled into my schedule, I'll figure out what other days work. But right now it's 100% every Friday at 5, with some other days sprinkled in when I can. Try every Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm thinking about doing Tuesdays for sure. Tuesdays is the top day I'm thinking of possibly starting to do. I'm thinking of doing Tuesday and Friday, and then maybe sometimes on the weekends as well. Tuesday is a definite I want to do Tuesdays. I'm just gonna have to see how my schedule is kind of playing out with the semester and everything. But what I'm doing right now, so earlier in the stream, I read some stories from some people in the chat. I read one from Jake, which was really great. It was I don't know if you were here last week, but the Englishman came back and we saw this kind of organization dealing with this crazy drug called the Ripper that made people go crazy. Super fun story. After that, we read one by Donovan, which is we read one by Donovan, which is so what was that one? My mind's blanking. It was really trippy. It was a really fun story. It was one where his parents are trying to stop him from being a firefighter, and his dad tries to kill him, and then it turns out that his parents died in a fire. He's been hallucinating them, and it was really it was a really fun, wild story. And then we read one by Bodes, which was called The Farm, which you can find on I'm reading the chat and laughing, which you can find on Reddit. A really great story about this entity that's kind of attacking the family's farm and their family because they're not donating stuff to it anymore, basically. And it's a really fun story, 3 parts. And I thought that was really good. But we switched from reader stories from viewer stories to reading some classic creepypasta stories, because right now I'm working on a YouTube video where I'm going to be ranking every classic creepypasta in a tier list. And so I'm trying to read them all just to kind of refresh my memory. And then I'm going to make that video and get that posted. And I might even stream me recording it at some point, but we'll see. But that's what's going on. You probably didn't need all of that context, but you got it anyway. I was reading what Sil put in the chat. That's really interesting. That is really interesting. Yeah. Pop-Tart ASMR? What is going on? I think what we're gonna do, guys, is that we're gonna read this one, and then we're gonna we're gonna finish reading this one, talk about it a little bit, and then I'm gonna read Lavender Town Syndrome, which is really short, and I think we're gonna call it after that because I have some stuff I need to work on off stream, and I'm gonna try to get this video recorded soon, and I'm thinking about recording it on stream, but I probably won't because I'm gonna have a script and everything, so we'll see. But yeah. The food rations past day 5, had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs to the ribcage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives of the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of a morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out to the point there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach, just repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility, the 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative that had given him to prepare him for surgery. When he fought furiously against his restraints, when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of his way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had tripled the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anesthetic, and he did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to still be alive, medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and had fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. The other two test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given. I must remain awake. All three subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back in the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all three stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might, first left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brain waves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper, scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brain waves immediately changed to that of a deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brain waves showed the same flat lines as one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed to the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. Sorry, I was looking for my water. I've been reading for almost 3 hours, guys. I'm struggling. I must know. Oh, wait. Sorry, guys. I'm struggling over here, believe it or not. Oh my god. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped to the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal heaven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's head and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. Okay, so the rest of this is just kind of some background information, the significance of the story, etc., etc. Um, I'll say this about the Russian sleep experiment. I'm gonna save my full thoughts for when I have time to like sit down and kind of probably reread it, write out like a little script, things like that. But for now, what I will say is I think the story was exciting for the time that it came out, which would have been like 2012, because I think a lot of people, especially like high schoolers, middle schoolers, just thought it was so crazy, right? Um, and this fear of sleep deprivation started right after this story. But I think, what the fuck did I just see? Marketing? Huh? Get him out of here. Um, no, I think this is like a fun story, but also you can kind of tell the author just was kind of throwing stuff at a wall, trying to like shock people, right? There's not a lot of this makes sense. There's not any kind of literary merit, and it's not really a very interesting story. Um, I think it's interesting to a middle schooler who, likes pulling all nighters and staying up all night, and they read this and they're like, oh my God, that might happen to me if I stay up all night. Um, and that's true. And that's true. If you were able to read this and think like, oh my God, this actually happened, I think, yeah, that could hit a little differently, especially when creepypastas weren't as popular, right? Because now we all know about the Russian sleep experiment as a creepypasta. Maybe when this first came out, people were looking at this as, oh my God, the real Russian sleep experiment. Did you hear about this crazy thing that happened when they did all this research? Um, I think the idea of the story is a lot more interesting than the story itself. Like if I were to have a conversation with someone and say, "Did you hear about the sleeping experiment where they made people stay up for 5 days and after that they didn't want to go back to sleep ever, and they like would fight people and they start killing each other and killing like I think that the idea of what happened is more interesting than the story itself. The story is not very well written, um, but for its time, it was. I think it's pretty fun. So I'm not gonna lie, guys, I'm running out of gas a little bit, and I have some things I need to finish before I go to bed. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna read Lavender Town Syndrome, and this is gonna be the last thing we do, and then I'm gonna get off stream and work on my story that I'm trying to get published here soon. And nah, I'm okay now. Thank you though, because I'm about to finish this. But we're gonna read Lavender Town Syndrome, which I haven't read, but I know a little bit about. And after I read this, we're gonna end the stream. I'm gonna go work on some writing, work on my script for my YouTube video. Um, Arcaden, I think you're good, but I also think if you don't know this, Sylve is like I think like you were saying that assuming Sylve was like a boy, because like guys like we joke like that to each other, right? But that's a girl. Like I wouldn't mind if he said that to me. Um, I mean, I wouldn't mind if you did it to me. Um, but you know, anyway, Lavender Town Syndrome. Silva is like as a Twitch name that does give off like a very like, oh, that's a guy, right? Like I thought when I first saw the name, I just assumed it was a guy until you told me what your like Reddit name was, and or I forget how I found out, but you explained that you were a girl in some way. But yeah, I'm gonna read the story. Then I'm gonna go work on my script for my YouTube video that I'm planning to release in the next couple weeks, and my short story that I'm also planning to release in the next week or so. Lavender Town Syndrome. The Lavender Town Syndrome, also known as Lavender Town Tone or the Lavender Town Suicides, was a peak in suicides and illnesses of children between the ages of 7 to 12 in Japan back in February 27th of 1996. The phenomenon occurred shortly after the release of the first Pokemon game, Pokemon Red and Green. Rumors say that these suicides and illnesses only occurred after children playing the game reached Lavender Town. The location's theme music had extremely high frequencies that studies have shown only children and young teens can hear because their ears are more sensitive. What? That doesn't make any sense. Due to this effect, at least 200 children supposedly committed suicide, and many more developed. Due to this effect, what effect? That they could hear the sound? Due to this effect, at least 200 children supposedly committed suicide, and many more developed conditions and afflictions. The children who killed themselves usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those who did not often acted irrationally and complained of severe headaches after listening to the theme. This mass hysteria was caused by the first revealed version of the game. After the incidents, the programmers fixed the location's music to be at a lower frequency. Lavender Town now sounds differently depending on which Pokemon you're playing, but since that change, children are no longer affected by the song. One video appeared in 2010 using special software to analyze the audio waves of Lavender Town's music. When played, the software created images of the Unknown near the end of the audio. This created controversy since the Unknown don't appear in the series until the Generation 2 games, Silver, Gold, and Crystal. The arrangement of the Unknown appears to translate to Leave Now. The original Lavender Town theme can be listened to below. Viewer discretion advised. All right, let's listen to it really quick, guys. Let me turn up my... Let me know if this is too loud. It's kind of angry. This does kind of make me want to fucking kill myself. I could see it. So if we're listening to the story, this should have been muted. That would have been funny. Because based on the story, the original theme could only be heard by children and teenagers because their ears are more sensitive. Or maybe it's only the certain frequencies. I guess only the certain frequencies they could hear because their ears are more sensitive. I'm not gonna lie, this story is fucking stupid. But oh, was it loud as shit? Oh, my bad. All right, how about we do a little roll call? If you're a boy, say 1. If you're a girl, say 2. Just kidding. 1. All right. 1 is boy, 2 is girl. Okay. Oh, 3. Hey, I don't judge, bro. Hey, whatever you are, you're welcome here. Yeah, okay, so this story, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty fucking stupid. None of it really makes sense, but this is another one where I'm gonna compare this to the Russian sleep experiment in the sense that, as Augustus pointed out, they were popular in a time where people would kind of just assume like no one would ever just get on the internet and lie. So if you hear about, so yeah, I can see a middle schooler or a high schooler reading this story and saying, "Oh, there was a game that whenever you listen to the music, it would make you kill yourself. Oh my god, like that actually happened in Japan." Um, I could see someone just blindly believing that and caring about that and being scared about that. So I could see this being effective only to young people who believed everything that they read on the internet. So if I had read this as, a 10-year-old, maybe I would have maybe I would have enjoyed it, right? Or maybe I would have believed it. And even if I didn't believe it, maybe I would have enjoyed the fact that it as a 10-year-old, maybe it seemed possible. And maybe I would have enjoyed um, you know, sharing it with my friends. But when you get to things like the theme music had extremely high frequencies that only children and young teens could hear because their ears are more sensitive, that doesn't make sense to anyone with any kind of brain, right? So I think if they were to write like an updated version of Lavender Town Syndrome, with like a witness account and a little more explanation of how this actually works, or if it doesn't work, trying not to explain it and just leaning into the um, this doesn't work. That is true. No, what? No, it's not. There's no way. There's a frequency that only teenagers can hear. That like, or only children between the ages of like, there are tones you can only hear as a kid. I mean, I believe like I believe like something might be possible, but there's no way that there's a song with like hidden music that only kids can hear. Let's Google this. There. Hmm. Interesting. Okay, but even still, what I'm getting from this is many adults it's that natural hearing loss results in you not being able to hear this. So it's not that like physically only a teenager can hear it. It's that as you get older your hearing gets worse and you're not able to hear certain sounds. But that's not always the case. And it even says like after age 25. It's not like as soon as you turn, you know, it's not like as soon as you turn 18, you can't hear it anymore. And it's not even just because they said it's ages 7 to 12. This hearing loss that according to, and I was using the Google AI overview. I'm not gonna lie, not a great source. Um, Not a great source. I was using the Google AI, but that's like it says that it starts it like that hearing loss that would make this possible starts at 25. They're saying it was ages 7 to 12, so like 15-year-olds can't hear it, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. Whatever the case, maybe I could be wrong about that. Um however, so like let's say like okay, so maybe I was wrong about this, right? Still, I think if you're going to like include something like this, I want like a little more like at least like convince me this is true and say it like because their ears are more sensitive. um I don't know, dude. That just seems so out there, but I guess it's true, whatever. But regardless, I think this was effective to kids, in the same way that that song was, I guess. um because they don't know better than to just believe something like this, and the story itself is not anything um great. Like it's a pretty poorly written story. Um, it needs to be fleshed out more, but I would put it in the same tier as, or maybe a tier below, um, the Russian sleep experiment, but in the same kind of category of they worked for their time, But if someone were to write this now, no one would care, right? But it probably did, and I'm gonna do some more research into um the history of this and exactly when it came out, because it would not surprise me if a lot of things, a lot of stories that we know are inspired by this, like other haunted game stories, um, and haunted media in general. Yeah, so according to my like little research I just did, um according to my little research that I just did, it's just natural hearing loss. So it's not that like there's special sounds that only kids can hear, but more so the sense that our ears naturally get worse as we get older. So when you start to get that natural hearing loss, the first thing that you're not able to hear anymore is those high pitched sounds. So in theory, someone who's younger with better ears could be able to hear something that you physically can't hear. But it's not like a foolproof thing, right? And it and the hearing loss apparently, according to Google AI, starts on average around 25. So it could be like you could be 30 and still be able to hear it, or you could be 20 and not be able to hear it. Um, it is very interesting though. And so this is like a little fun one, but nothing that I would the way I'm doing my uh what is going on in my chat? So the way that I'm doing my tier list that I'm going to be working on is everything is ranked on is it worth reading? And the factors within is it worth reading is, obviously like is it a good story that you would get enjoyment from reading? Um or is it worth reading because of its relevance to, you know, creepypastas as a whole and like the horror genre. And so Lavender Town Syndrome, it is relevant to the genre because I think it inspired a lot of later creepypastas. However, I don't think it's worth reading because there's nothing special about the story and it can be pretty easily described to you. Russian Sleep Experiment, I also don't think is worth reading. Um, Now, a classic one that I think is worth reading would be like The Rake. I think Injustice said he's like 74. Oh, Sylv, I'm also 26. I'm 26. Natalie's 24. Augustus is 87. Back in my day. He's 83. That's crazy. Uh, I guess how come you don't stream anymore? I know, like, yeah, I know you used to stream a bit, but uh, I was looking at your Twitch the other day, and can we make that our new thing? Can we make that our new thing, guys? Whenever someone is in here and they're talking about Augustus or they're talking to Augustus, convince them that he's 83. That's going to be our new thing. Augustus is 83 according to us. Cool. If you stream, let me know and I'll be sure to check it out. Cuz I saw it like I want to say it's been like what was it 4 months since your last stream? Yeah. Ooh, a booty call. That's crazy. I'm curious, before I get out of here, what is everyone's favorite creepypasta slash no sleep story? Specifically a classic one. Because for me, if I had to pick one, I'm gonna say if I had to pick one, I think going Pin Pal as my one, but my Mount Rushmore is like Pin Pal, Baraska, 1999, Left Slash Right Game, and Tales from the Gas Station. That might be more than 4. Um, but those are the ones that I'm like, if someone's trying to get into like the creepypasta no sleep community, I would tell them like you gotta read all of those. Yeah. So we have a similar list there. I think if we're going off like what's written the best, I think well, it's hard to say because gas station Tales from the Gas Station might be written the best. Um because it's just so well written and the lore is amazing. Um and it does a great job of combining like comedy with horror with actual like depressing elements. It's so good. Um of Big B. Oh, so you talking about Baraska? Yeah, Big B, Baraska. Yeah. And then you know what I think is actually though the best written no sleep story ever. It's called Stuck by Matt Demersky. Specifically, if you want to listen to a great narration, the dark somnium. Um, someone has been standing outside. Someone has been standing in front of my house for over a year. I think is the video title, and it is genuinely like the most well written creepypasta ever. I'm saying creepypasta, but I don't really consider that a creepypasta. The best no sleep story ever. Now it doesn't have like the same um love from me that I get from Baraska or Left Slash Right Game or any of those, but it does just being well written. It doesn't have the same nostalgia, but it's so good. It's amazingly well written. Caver King stories for this guy, Augustus Martis VT. Those are pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Those might be moving up the rankings. The only problem is getting them seen by more people. I genuinely do think more people need to read your work, and I wish there was a way to make that happen. I definitely think you should promote your book on the Creepcast subreddit if you haven't already, because people love to like support an author who's published a book, and so many people have done that, and they've always gotten a lot of love. But yeah, like I think like Matt Demersky is like one of the best no sleep slash creepypasta writers. He also did the Black Square. If you guys have seen Tales from the Void, really, are you actually gonna get read by Creepcast? That would be amazing for you, man, and amazing for us, the readers. Possibly. Wait, I was told this? Am I missing something? This is so amazing. But yeah, yeah, I'm assuming you have to like, you know, you can't give dates and things like that to the public. Um, so if you tell me anything, it will be my sworn secret. Um, but yeah, if you guys are looking for like story recommendations, Matt Demersky, I think, is probably the GOAT when it comes to writing like no sleep and creepypasta stories. He wrote Bedtime, Psychosis, Stuck, The Black Square. Um, I'm missing some. A Shattered Life, which is one of the best. But the thing about Matt Demersky is I don't think he'll ever have the clout of like Tales from the Void that had it adapted the Black Square. Yeah, Tales from the Void. Yeah, so dude, we would love to have you in there. Um, and what I've been doing for what I've been doing for my streams recently is sorry, I was looking at something. What I've been doing for my streams recently, can I speak? Holy shit. What I've been doing for my streams recently is I have a channel in my Discord called Read Me on Stream. And if you want a story read, all you have to do is just like paste a link to the story in there. And I pretty much go in order of what's posted in there. So like if you put something in there that you want to be read next stream, I'll just go through the chat, whatever's there, I'll be reading it. Up to a certain point. If there's 50 stories, I probably only have time for, about 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 at most. But we don't get that many. So if you ever want anything read, paste it in there. Also, if you ever want feedback on a story, post it in there. If you want if you want feedback on something, you can post it in there, and I'll give you feedback off stream. Any of us will, lots of us in there will give you feedback off stream. Or if you just want to chat, we just chat in there, talk about writing, talk about life, whatever. Luna, aka Nat, is in there. So if you want to talk to her, she's in there. Oh man, that's a very specific story request, Jake. I don't know. I don't know anything like that. Yeah, I would love to let everyone know. Um, I will Yeah, so dude, I'm dumb, dude. Um, let me I misunderstood what I guess I was saying. Yeah, so guys, I know that like we're wrapping up here and some people have left. Next Friday, me and Augustus are going to be running this stream together. So me and him will have to figure out how that's going to work on the back end. But we're going to be reading some stories, and he's going to be here in the call with me. Like I said, we're going to figure out how it's going to work, but we're, going to read stories, talk about them together. And then we're even going to, I think, read a couple of his stories. And that way he'll be here for, if anyone wants to ask him any questions, or if I want to ask him questions and just talk about the story. I think it'll be really cool to have, a second person here who's also a really great writer to, bounce ideas off of, talk about the stories with, and, also just like we'll be reading some of his stories so we can actually talk to him about his work. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So next Friday, 7 p.m., me and Augustus will be here reading some stories, reading some of his stories. And I think that'll be really fun. Um, I'm thinking about, trying to do something where we have an author on every now and then, but also I just think Augustus is a really cool guy. I think me and him will get along really well. So who knows, maybe me and him will do more streams together in the future. Anyway, guys, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling about nothing at this point. I suck at ending my streams, but this was a really fun one. I'm going to go ahead and get off and go work on some personal stuff. But thank you guys so much for coming out. The plan is I'm going to be streaming next Friday, 7 p.m. Central Time with Augustus. Maybe a stream in between then. But besides that, what I'm going to be working on is a new YouTube video that I plan to release in the next couple weeks. and a new no sleep story that I plan to have out within the next week or so. Um, Join the Discord if you have any questions, you want to talk about writing, chat with us in there. Hope everyone has a good night. And, if you want any stories read for next stream, just drop them in that read me on stream chat. Everyone have a good night. I'll talk to you soon. Um, yeah. See you later, guys.